Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this virtual professional development opportunity. My name is Joe Schmidt, and I'm the Social Studies Specialist for the Maine Department of Education. This afternoon's session is using National Geographic online resources for teaching, and our presenter today is the esteemed Sarah Bailey. Sarah is a National Geographic certified educator. She is the 2020 Maine Gilder Learman Social Studies Teacher of the Year. She's an alumni of my DOE Community Teacher Leaders, Social Studies Teacher Leader cohort, and a frequent presenter at NCSS, as we were talking right before we hit record. Sarah is definitely one of the best of the best. And when we're talking about geography education in the state of Maine, she's the one we're going to turn to for this. And I know there are others out there. If you're listening, please, this is not an insult. Just know that Sarah is fantastic. So without any further, was that enough, Sarah? Did I get you?
That works.
Perfect. Okay. Without any further ado, I will turn it over to Sarah Bailey from South Portland High School.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. We will get started with learning about some resources that I have found very useful in the classroom. A lot of times when we think National Geographic, we don't usually associate it with social studies. A lot of times is reserved for the sciences and so forth. But I had the opportunity to connect with Nat Geo when I had gone out to the National Council for the Social Studies conference that they hold annually in 2018, and was very interested in their educational leadership opportunities that they offer out. There's all kinds of grants, there's teacher certification, and there's also courses that they offer. So in 2019, I went through the process of becoming a Nat Geo certified teacher. I cannot highly recommend it enough. It was a fantastic opportunity. I have continued on taking different courses with National Geographic. I have stayed in touch with quite a few individuals who were in my cohort with it, and then also made connections even further when I had gone in 2019 down to Austin for the National Council for the Social Studies. So my purpose today is just to share out with you some really outstanding resources that National Geographic offers out to their teachers. The nice opportunity with National Geographic is pretty much everything that they offer is free. It's for you to reproduce, to utilize in your classroom. When we had been first introduced to COVID last year, National Geographic hopped right on board with a bunch of different organizations trying to figure out how to best support parents, teachers, and students in the learning process. And the decision was made to come together and create an at-home opportunity as well. That at-home opportunity they still are offering out. So today I am planning to share out with you some valuable resources and give you some skills, hopefully, that you'll be able to utilize in your classroom that will help to add into the geography component. We all know that it's really important for students to know where we're talking about. When we're talking about different places of the world, how we connect with each other, how cultures interact with each other, and just really driving home that they have a connection to our environment. So that's one of National Geographic's main focus is the human environment interaction. And it's really starting to bring about that you can connect different subjects together. Through National Geographic's teachings, I actually have introduced labs into my classroom, which I never thought I'd be able to do science labs in there. And with my freshmen and also with my juniors, we have done a ton of really cool hands-on things for those. And I'll go through a couple of those with you today. So just an overview, we're going to run through the classroom resource homepage. I'll show you the different resources that are available to that. I will show you the at-home learning that National Geographic has provided out. Their Explorer classroom, they are still having explorers connect with classrooms now. You can actually even do the experience at home if you have your own children. You just have to connect online. So we'll take a peek at that. Wide Open School is their online platform that they've joined together with a lot of different organizations to provide out learning opportunities for students if they are still at home, or even if you're looking for enrichment for your students themselves, they can log right onto there, and parents can as well. And then I'll go through the educator opportunities and the fantastic online resources and courses that they're offering out currently. So one of the really big components when we look at National Geographic, it's really overwhelming. There's over 500,000 resources available from National Geographic that teachers, educators have access to. It ranges in wide varieties from articles to lesson plans. There's entire units that are available. There's little clips for them to watch. There's long videos. But whatever you're looking for, you can hone in, particularly with a subject, with your students. And then if it's articles, you can change the Lexile level. So this is really hands-on. It's manageable for your classroom. And it's great to just have even as just a support for whatever topic you're going over. So this particular classroom resource that I am sharing out with you, what you'll notice if you're looking at this in particular is that the classroom resource, you're able to kind of pick and choose what resource you want to be able to have available to you. So as I mentioned, there's activities in here, articles, there's infographics and large lesson plans. There's a mapping activity. I'll particularly share out that one with you as well. There's photographs, and then there's units and videos. You're able to change it for the grade level that you would be looking to deal with. The nice piece also is a lot of kind of the 6 through 8 stuff. You are able to use that in a 9th grade classroom. You can pair it up or pair it down. You also could take some of the 6th grade work and pair it down into a 4th grade unit as well. A lot of it is interchangeable. Even if you have your, your first graders, your kindergartners, if they're learning about their neighborhoods, if they're learning about spatial placing and so forth, you can pull resources from the maps that National Geographic offers out and still be able to have it be hands-on fun learning for them. You have the ability to change it for the subject. There is a lot of science in here as well, but there's a lot of incorporation of other subjects in with the sciences. So I utilize a lot with the geography and the social studies, religions in here. I pulled that in with the science aspect. So there's a lot of cool, fun things going on. This is kind of your homepage for information in terms of where you'll be able to go through. They always highlight out resources for the month that they're offering out. And then a lot of times if they have an explorer who's going to be talking, that particular explorer will connect in a lot with the monthly units that they have as well. There are other resources available. They offer out a magazine. And then these are the featured collections that they have. If you scroll down, there's mapping opportunities. So this website in particular, this part of the website really is in depth. This is the one that's probably going to take you the longest time to go through and really see what it has to offer out and opportunities that might be available to you. If we are talking particularly about some things that are kind of some hands-on fun things for students to do. I have highlighted out some things that I have done in the classroom. So it's broken down my activity and articles collection. The collections are really nice because it's literally everything you possibly could need to teach a particular unit. It's going to have everything housed right in one spot. So you can, be able to put together unit itself, pull articles in, pull lesson plans in, maps, videos, and so forth. There are fun games on here. There is a Kahoot game, for example, that you can play if you're testing your students' ancient knowledge. This is geared for 6 through 8. My freshmen have used it, and it was just kind of a fun way for us to be able to do it. So if you're ever looking to play Kahoot, there are a lot of Kahoot games that are actually on the website itself that you can utilize out in particular. The articles that I had been talking about, again, 5 through 8, 8 through 12, you can change the grade level through it. You also could put a 6 through 12, or you could do K through 5, depending on what your school system looks like. And then again, you would be able to kind of change out the Lexile level as needed. The nice thing about when you're giving out these articles to students, they don't have to worry about logging in. They don't have to worry about, do I need a username, password? Where are we? Where are we going? It actually sends them directly to where they need to be. It also includes an image, so it draws students' attention to what you're going over. Usually there's a couple images, but then as you start to scroll through and you introduce the article to students, they'll notice that there's kind of these underlined words. They can click on these particular words. It will give them a definition of it. It also will teach them how to pronounce it. The other nice thing too, if you're building word walls, it has vocabulary. So it already provides out for students what these terms are, what they could be watching for as they're reading through it and trying to learn more information about it. The articles, I think, are a great kind of jumping point. A lot of times if we're having discussions, we'll read through the article. I'm always curious to know what people utilize for different ways to see if students have retained information. So two of my favorites are Brain Dump, where I'll give the students an article. They're timed out. Sometimes they panic in terms of how long they have to do the actual article itself, but usually it's enough time. And then their task is to close out of the article and just brain dump out everything that they can remember about the article. And sometimes they surprise themselves because if we're just doing kind of question and answer for reading an article, they sometimes look just particularly for those questions or those answers. Another fun thing to do is a read and draw. So we'll read articles and then I put huge chart paper up on the wall, and the students' task once they're finished is to grab some markers and they draw out something that they remember about their reading. It's a fun way to see what they remember, but also kind of the important piece, what they retained. And then I have them talk about what they drew and why it was important to the article itself. So kind of a fun tidbit with that. The collections that I had been mentioning to you, these ones here are large houses, as I had mentioned to you. They're particularly designed, this one here is human impacts on the environment. We spend quite a bit of time in our freshman unit, and our first unit is on culture. And we talk about human environment interaction. We talk about domestication of animals and development of crops. We look at water scarcity. We talk about insects as a form of food. And if you're going to NCSS or plan to attend this year, I actually will be presenting out on how bugs are creating a sustainable food source for our planet. But this here is nice because again, you can kind of go through and you can pick components in terms of what might draw attention for your students, what they might be interested in. It also allows your students a little bit of freedom. So if you tell them, hey, this is the big topic we're going to be looking over, I have the expectation that you're going to go through and you're going to find something that you can teach your classmates about. So there's tons of articles, there's activities to get them drawn into it, and then there's particular lessons themselves. There's videos. A lot of these videos are short and small clips, which will keep the attention going. And then again, just having small conversations with students afterwards. There is the encyclopedia entries. Those are going to be, your basic articles that you're going to have as well. And then if you're doing an activity with them, the nice piece is that it will particularly give you the objectives. So depending if you're working on with the 3 C's, if you're looking to work with the main learning results, whatever your school has chosen as your standards, you can go through and basically check the objectives, check what standards they meet, and then be able to go through and say, yeah, this lesson will really work in case you need to build your own plan for it itself. And then of course the preparation will tell you exactly what you'll need. A lot of these are low key. They're designed to, get students hands-on, get them interested in what's going on, but not meant to overwhelm teachers in any way as they start to kind of prep out these lessons and any of these plans that they would have. The infographics that they have are designed to basically be these beautiful picture forms of information. You can actually print them off. I have been able to print these in larger scale. So if you know that you have some aspect of teaching within your unit that you're going to be utilizing, if you're focusing on mummification, for example, the infographics are nice just because they do use a lot of pictures to go through the information. They're colorful illustrations. There's points that have information in them for you. And then there's these little components here that will further talk about the, canopic jars and the embalming process itself, the reasons why you would use the resin, and then of course the linens that would go with it. So there's lots of infographics as well. And again, vocabulary. So as I mentioned, this is super user friendly. Students can hop on there. The vocabulary that's utilized is easy. Again, you can change the lexile level if you're going to be doing the reading, depending on what type of learners you have in the classroom. You also could change the language with the articles as well. A piece that I have enjoyed is kind of playing around with the lessons that they actually offer. Sometimes when we're looking at lessons, pieces of it work and other pieces of it don't. My students have focused on water scarcity. If we're looking at the state of Maine, water scarcity is something that's really coming into the light. Our ocean waters, for example, are rising. They're becoming warmer than 99% of the world's oceans. So it's really becoming important that students understand our water scarcity issues that we're having. And so we've talked a lot about sea currents. We've talked about rising temperatures. We talked about rising waters. We've looked at different areas in the world and what water scarcity looks like for them. We've done an in-depth study where we pulled the ancient Nile. We actually did a DBQ from the DBQ project, and then looked at the modern Nile. We pulled an article from both National Geographic and BBC to look at and do comparisons between what's happening. And then students went through and literally mapped out the Nile River itself to see where these issues are. They've been looking at the dams. They looked at the convergence of the Blue Nile and the White Nile, but just kind of some really fun activities that you can drive in as you're working through it. A day without water is a really good way for students to understand what water scarcity looks like. When, not this year, but in the past, when we've been able to, we go outside and the kids have big, huge jugs and we fill them up, and they're responsible for carrying these jugs. And it's funny to watch students because they're like, this is too heavy. I can't carry this. And I show them a picture of, of a woman who could be in her 70s carrying a jug of water, carrying 2 jugs of water. And it puts in perspective of them, like, this is a survival component for them. We talk about, how long it takes to go and get water, what water looks like. And then we do a water experiment as well. There's some kind of fun tidbits in there that I'm happy to share out about water scarcity that you can utilize. Procter and Gamble has these great little packets from the water project where you can get a 5-gallon bucket and you put the dirty, dirty water in there, and then you put these little packets in. And I think it's about a half an hour, and it literally will just filter out all this sediment and give you some drinking water. But again, it's tying science into social studies, which we don't ever think about being able to do. We also do sea ice labs. NASA has some really great hands-on labs that connect in water scarcity, that connect in rising sea temperatures and so forth. And so we've used some of those, but there's a ton of different resources as well that NASA has that you could pull into your classroom. One of my favorite things to do is utilize National Geographic's maps that they have. And they have these giant maps. We do have one in the state of Maine where you can actually take it and put it into your gymnasium, and it will cover a huge chunk of your floor. And it enables students to basically get a hands-on visual of how big different regions are and so forth. They also have these really cool tabletop size maps and also very large maps that you can print off sections of and utilize them out. And what I have done with students is we have gone through, I'll show you pictures in just a moment, but we've actually gone through and we made a massive 6 by 6 foot map of the Roman trade organization. And so we basically drew out and colored in and all my classes worked together on this project. They were responsible for kind of going in and coloring out sections of what the Roman Empire looked like. And then we dropped in sea routes and trade routes. And we also started to put in these little icons that represented what goods and services were moving through the empire itself. And then we also dropped in who was living, what cultures with ethnicities were coming in to the region itself while Rome was expanding outward. So it's a great hands-on learning opportunity for students to utilize. If you are not going to use that and you're just looking for maps to use, there are thousands of maps that National Geographic has that you can just use for images and so forth that are printable. And they really enable you to add into presentations, but also, again, to kind of give those visuals to students. You could use this one in particular for the trade routes. If you were going to be doing comparisons potentially between what trade routes look like during colonial times versus what trade routes look like now. You could talk about different ports. You could be examining out the this versus once we have the scramble for Africa, and then the expansion out into having ports in India and, of course, in the Far East as well. The units, I found myself once I came home from National Geographic, from NCSS, connecting with National Geographic, really wanting to hone in on climate change and how I could take classrooms that were social studies and get individuals thinking about geography, thinking about where we live, what's going on, and how do I really press upon this is real. We're seeing this is what's happening. And being on the coast of Maine, one of the easiest ways that I did that is I started to talk about our lobster population and how they're migrating northward and how we are getting sea bass coming in and they're eating the chicks and they're invasive. And then we started talking about how we've lost our cod population or shrimp population. And then it starts to draw in, okay, what factors are playing into that? Well, we've got overfishing, we've got rising sea temperatures, rising sea levels. We start talking about the Labadee Current, we start talking about the Gulf Current. Then we start building in. And so we actually went through and we created these beautiful maps that were able to kind of go through and figure out what affected what as we're looking at climate change in particular. So I have drawn from this as well. There's great resources, great information in this unit that allows you to kind of just have students understand what climate change is. And then there's also a geo challenge that they've kind of put a hold on, but it enables students as a whole class to actually be able to work with National Geographic and try to solve a problem. And the problem that they were working with, it actually would be from 2019, just because of COVID, was how do you fix the world's plastic problem? And so students had to come together as class and try to come up with ways that they could fix the plastic problem that we're dealing with. It creates this whole great conversation because then we start talking about, garbage piles. We start talking about, well, what do you have in your own classroom or what do you have at home that you're utilizing, right? What does our household look like that might be different from another household in terms of where they live and what they're utilizing? We talk about like microbeads in terms of like face washes and hand soaps and how those are plastics, how they're affecting the oceans, and then where do those transfer into? So we've actually been able to map out how these garbage piles have kind of come together, the different marine species that are being affected by it, and then how does that affect village fishing populations? And so we've taken a look at where these kind of big garbage piles are in the world. And then we've particularly honed in on areas around the Philippines and areas around Japan. We actually have one that's floating off the East Coast, believe it or not, and how it's affecting our own fishing. And they're basically opening up these fish and finding all these plastics, and we can't serve them out. So how do we start to come together and create new opportunities for individuals to fix the plastics? So there's lots of different lessons that are in this one as well. And as I mentioned, have fun with this. There's so much that National Geographic offers out to be able to really play around with and be able to see, hey, here's what they have to offer. They're constantly changing. They're always, taking advice. One of the best things I've been able to do is connect in with kind of my National Geographic community. And teachers are always posting out information. Hey, did you see this article? Were you able to have, has anybody tried this lesson plan and so forth? If you get on to the teacher newsletter, it comes in, I think I get one almost every day, and small little blips, it might be every other day. But it's got all lesson plans that they've added in. It's a way to connect with the community. It will tell you, here's the explorer who's coming up for the week. It'll tell you about different opportunities that you're going to have as well. So as I mentioned to you, some fun things. Oh, sorry.
Can I jump in? There was just a little bit, the section you were working in, there's a question about how do you, what about people who might say, they're not a believer of climate change, or skeptical. Let's go with that. Skeptical of climate change when you're addressing some of these issues. How do you work with that, either with students or with families?
Yeah, that's a great question that of course has come up in the classroom. And one of the things that we like to do, we try to just brainstorm out, what are we seeing going on? What are the reasons why people might not buy into climate change? And what are the reasons people do buy into climate change? I also like to start my unit off when we're looking at climate change. I'll grab a bunch of articles that will support climate change and don't support climate change. And I have the students read both sides of it and then have them give an argument for whether they support it or not. So that's one thing. The other thing, you can have the full on argument with your students. It's always nice to have a good debate with them about whether climate change exists or not. But I also think it's important to show them visuals to kind of say, if you don't think it's climate change, then let's talk through what potential issues are going on in the world and what can cause it. And I think it opens safe doors for students who might not be believers of climate change to say, oh, well, I think it's this. And if that's what they think, that's great. So let's gather some evidence behind it that supports your reasoning. So I'm always hesitant to say to students, well, you're wrong. Climate change does exist. There's tons of evidence to support it. So in order to foster, those students who might not buy into it, or even those families, I think it's a great way to just open up huge conversations and just say to them, like, okay, we're on this side of the fence, you're on this side of the fence. Let's talk through, let's find the actual evidence. That's a big thing I work with my students every single year. Where's the evidence? I love that you guys are making statements. I love that you have your own opinions, but where's the actual evidence? And then making sure that that evidence is coming from reliable sources as well. So I think that helps with it. And then if you're looking for resources, as I mentioned, National Geographic is a great one. The Water Project is another one. The Gulf of Maine Research Institute has tons of resources available for teachers as well. But yeah, it can absolutely be a hard buy-in for some of your students. But I think just having open conversations, trying to get students to see both sides of it. And then if they're still adamant that it doesn't exist, I guess you can chalk it up for what it is, or try to press upon, tell me what's going on. Tell me why you think that's not the case.
Sarah, do you mind if I jump in very quickly?
Yeah.
It's not a Nat Geo resource. One of the things I've been working with educators to really think about is, if you're thinking like, okay, like this is a contentious issue, right? We know how people dress in society, is I would do a two-parter on it. Is I start with the empirical data, right? We're not debating climate change, whether it's real or not. Let's look at data. And Sarah, you talked about this earlier, right? Like, what are the temperatures of the Gulf of Maine water? What can we see? Let's look at this. Let's go. Okay, so we have this empirical data. Now, the question we're going to discuss is, what should be our role in trying to slow down the Gulf of Maine, right? Should the government get involved? Is this our responsibility? Is this, because now we're not getting into the idea of debating these facts, or whether, have this, or, because somebody said, well, people ignore facts. Great, we're not even gonna have that discussion, right? Because I think whether you believe in climate change or don't believe in climate change, you can still have a wide variety of what should be done about it, right? Sarah and I can have the same beliefs about it, but still think the government should be involved or not be involved, or we should cap industry, right? And carbon, like that type of stuff. Like, there's so many different ways to approach it. So I've been pushing on teachers to say, like, address the data and that contentious issue, and then move it to a policy place, right? All policies are welcome on the table. We're not going to debate the empirical data part of it. So put students in a little safer place where you're not having to worry about them denying certain ideas.
Thank you. And that, that also brings up the point too, that when we're looking at, setting up classrooms, we're looking at setting lesson plans. This is one of the reasons why we have essential questions. It's great to write them up on the board. It's great to recircle back to those essential questions so students have a strong understanding of basically what's being asked of them. This is just a small sampling of some fun stuff that we've done through National Geographic that's honed in on kind of contributing science into social studies. So we did some comparisons between the ancient and modern Nile itself. And then, as I mentioned to you, when the students had the facts down, we then took a big, huge, massive map through National Geographic of the Nile, and the students literally charted out concerns within the Nile itself. That helped us to actually have conversations very similar to what Joe was talking about. So if you didn't believe in climate change, if you weren't seeing kind of the changes that were going on, that helped us to look at water levels. It helped us to look at the different dams that are affected, that are affecting the Nile itself between the Blue Nile and the White Nile. And then we also had gone in and were able to look at migration of birds as well as fish populations. We did go through the climate change unit lab that they had, and were able to, I had students who created infographics. So that was kind of a fun thing for them to do. This here was our sea ice lab that we had done as we were talking about climate change in particular. And so students worked, this is pre-COVID, students had worked together in order to basically set up a lab where we had heat lamp source, and they had one station that had sea ice and another station that did not. And then they kept recording the temperatures. We then talked about, how do we deal with this issue of having these big, massive sheets of ice that are sheathing off, that should be sheathing off. Yet now we're tipping the scales. We're seeing, these density issues because of not having enough salt water. You've got warm waters that's mixing with colder waters. How can we potentially fix this individual problem? These maps that you see here, this is my 6'6" map that students end up doing that deals with the Roman unit, with the Roman Empire itself. So they do go through and they color out modern countries of where the Roman Empire would have been. Then we go through and basically trace out, and then they work together to basically add in those trade routes and so forth. So as you can see, this is one class working on one section of the map itself. And then they have a lot of fun trying to put it together with the other sections. We do a bug unit. So the students actually go through and they do try bugs as part of our cultural component and learning about different areas around the world, the protein sources that they utilize, and how they access out protein sources. So we tie in guns, germs, and steel. We'll talk about domestication of animals. We look at the concept of hunter-gatherer, the transfer into agriculture, and then we talk about the actual human body development in terms of how we were able to digest food or not digest food. And then we talk about things like dentistry and medicine and how they all pull into each other. And then just, of course, a lot of collaboration that we end up doing as a class in particular. Okay, at-home learning. So because we did not really know what was going on last March and where we were going to be in terms of schools and learning, and every teacher was basically turned upside down along with every child. So National Geographic went through and they decided to create this fantastic resource where you would be able to learn at home about any subject that National Geographic could basically cover. And so they had gone through and provided out all kinds of opportunities. And some of these opportunities included Explorer classrooms, some hands-on learning that students could do that was self-directed, which is great. We love it when students can go off, that they can basically set an agenda for themselves. A lot of times will have my students create their own essential question that they're trying to answer, and then have them pull in the resources to help support it. And so National Geographic went through and basically created these resources that allowed students to be able to work together, work on their own, but also do some really cool hands-on learning. And so one of these is learning through play. And it had lots of opportunities or ideas for students that they could do actually at home and learning about their community and learning about different ideas and so forth. The citizen science project is a really fun one that students set themselves in terms of how they interact with the world. They come up with kind of a problem that they're trying to solve, and they work collectively together in terms of how they can present out this information, what resources they would need, what they need to know more about. And then they will gather data. Sometimes it's, hands-on physical data that they need to gather. As you can see in the picture, sometimes it's samples that they're analyzing out. Our science department has been great about allowing us to do some of that hands-on and borrowing supplies and so forth, just because we are doing that interdisciplinary connections with each other. I have listed out, you have access to the slideshow itself, but I have listed out all kinds of different at-home learning opportunities that you have. And again, the resource collection is great because you can go through and be able to kind of pick and choose what you want to access out in terms of opportunities and so forth for your students, or even if they're doing at-home learning. I know we still have quite a few students that are doing cohort C that are choosing to learn from home rather than being in the classroom. So if you're looking to give them a little bit more enrichment in terms of what they're getting from you versus having to read packets or information on their own, this is a great one to be able to go through and be able to really start to make connections and feel like they're a part of the classroom itself. The infectious disease collection, I am currently working on with my students. This one here ties in great with the Black Death. If you're talking about influenza of 1918, if you're looking at COVID, we have spent quite a bit of time at looking at infectious agents and how they connect. What have we seen change over time and what has stayed the same? So there's fantastic resources in here that has allowed students to kind of look at particular diseases, to look at infection rates, to look at different types of incentives that individuals have had to try and very quickly come up with reasons why this is taking place or what has happened and so forth. The the trade and Black Death one we are currently working on. I created a CSI investigation for students where we do a little bit of background information. National Geographic, as I mentioned to you, has some really cool, quick videos. There's one on the plague. It's called Plague 101, and it talks particularly about what historically we've seen: Justinian plague, Black plague, so forth, and potential culprits. Then by creating a CSI investigation, students get files, and their job is to go through and look at evidence and determine out what is the actual culprit of the Black Death. Was it miasma? Was it the fleas? Was it unsanitary conditions? Was it trade routes? So they're responsible for basically going through the evidence and trying to figure out, okay, yes, this is what was responsible. No, it was not. Yersinia pestis, which of course is the Black Death itself. They do actually have a sample of it that they still house out at the Ministry of Defense in London. And so you can get further information about that, and they'll provide out basically the testing that they do on it and the reasons why they still have it. You can connect it in when we get into flu season, and talk about infectious diseases, how they spread, what we think the responsible partners are, and then create maps. Go through, figure out, grab a big, huge map, grab some chart paper, and have students start, writing down ideas in terms of why disease spreads. And then grab some maps and have students start figuring out, okay, this is where it came from, and this is where they think it came from. How did it get from here to over here and then up here? And then start talking about population density. Start looking at the reasons why it affected larger populations, such as those who are living in London versus those who were more in rural areas themselves. So there's some really fun layers that you can tie into it. We have gone through, we've talked about the silk trade road and how that was basically one of the enablers for the Black Death to come in. We talked about the actual shipping trade routes as well, and how quickly it spread from North Africa up into Europe. So there's some really fun ways that you can go through and have students start to kind of analyze out this information in itself. All right, Explorer Classroom. The Explorer Classroom, it's a little kind of on the downside right now, but the Explorer Classroom is a great one. It is an opportunity for classrooms to connect with a National Geographic Explorer. The last one that we connected in with was an explorer who actually was in Antarctica. So there's some really cool individuals who are doing some really amazing things with geography around the world that are willing to sit and talk to classes. You can send in your questions ahead of time, and then you sit and you chat, and they basically answer all questions. They'll tell you what their job is. It's nice because it connects a human with what you're doing. It gives, this human piece to it that a lot of times, if you're sitting in the classroom, you're talking the whole time, your kids get bored with it. You can have them talk, you can have them listen to each other. But because of everything that's going on in the dynamic and how different our classes look right now, this is a fantastic resource to be able to say to the kids, hey, if you're at home, if you're in class, this is what we're doing. We're going to log on Thursdays at 10 a.m. Here's the Explorer that we're connecting with. If you've got little kids, it's on Mondays at 11 a.m. And it's fantastic. You can join in. It'll give you a list of the explorers. As you can see, you basically sit there, you interact as you're going through it, but it will tell you who the particular explorers are. It says none right now, but there was one gentleman who was working off the coast of Australia. That was last week's. But it kind of gives you some more information about this. So definitely keep this one in your pocket if you're looking to basically have someone come in as a guest speaker. It's a great resource to be able to use, and it's free. Wide Open Schools. Okay, this is your one-stop shop. They partnered with Common Sense, which is a fantastic website. You know that you're getting legitimate websites that are safe for your students to use either in school or at home. And so Wide Open Schools went through with partnering with different organizations. And the process behind it was to gather families together, was to truly make sure that students were getting something out of their learning that was going on, especially knowing that there's current gaps. We can't teach everything. We have to pick and choose constantly. We know that sometimes things get amiss. And so how do we, just foster really creating these individuals, fostering learning and hoping that students have a love for the learning that's going on. So Wide Open Schools is designed for preschool through grade 12, and there's all kinds of really fun things that are in here. So there's a daily plan. If you have students that are struggling to stay organized, you actually can go through and they can set a daily planner for themselves, and it'll enable them to know what they have to do at any given time. We're always concerned right now with the emotional well-being of our students who are in school as well as out of school. So there's great resources in here that you can send parents to, that you can have your students even do as kind of a daily component. You may even use it as like a bell ringer. Bring your students together, get them moving, get them talking, and then start class. Just do a quick check-in with them. There's also a fitness component as well that you could start your day off with students. There's some really fun things. There's life skills in here. There is some cooking opportunities where you could have your kids hands-on, probably at home, doing some cooking, learning about different cultures, bringing in lots of different foods that they may not know about. One of my fun things to do with freshmen, we actually take a table full of fruits and vegetables and I ask them about them. It's amazing to me that a lot of them do not know what an eggplant looks like, for example, or even okra, which is not really a common, common vegetable for them to have. So we talk about, bringing in, and some students are like, "Oh, we have that all the time," and others like, "I have no idea what that is." So by bringing in food, it's a great way to start a conversation. It's a great way for students to talk about what their upbringing looks like, what their experiences have been, to share out holidays and traditions that they have with each other. So food's always a fun one. And it's also how we introduce our food scarcity unit as well. So I'm just going to very briefly show you what one of these looks like, for example, just so you have an idea. There's all kinds of fun resources. Again, it's by grade level. It's definitely interchangeable. And then you have access to all kinds of different things. So there's activities, articles, there's worksheets. That was big for our family back in the springtime when we really didn't know what was going on. I was literally pulling from everything I possibly could think of in order to get my girls interested in learning, keeping up with their schoolwork, keeping healthy minds, and trying to stay active. So the worksheets are kind of a fun one. This is a playbook, for example. We did one on sharks, where we basically were learning about sharks, and we were talking, or through the science component, we're learning about whether sharks could actually sink. And so we were learning about buoyancy, and we were looking about the structure of sharks itself. We were looking at the dorsal fins. So really some fun stuff if you're looking as add-ins, or if you want to encourage that summer learning for your students, or even for your children at home. The educator community is my home base for connecting in with educators. I think it should send me into mine. No, maybe not. But it's kind of this dumping ground where you're able to post out questions and blogs, resources that individuals have found that have worked in the community. It is an opportunity to talk about different courses if you have questions about them. It's really a fun way to be able to connect in with each other. And so, as I mentioned to you, these latest posts, this one sharing out an exceptional and free professional development opportunity. We're always looking for, new opportunities to kind of engage in our classroom. If you're looking for grants and so forth, a lot of information gets posted out here. This one is the Spaceship Earth hosting at a Global Youth Climate Summit. So there's also stuff that gets posted out for students to be able to utilize in their classroom as well. The Educator Network newsletter. This one here gets sent out on a regular basis, and it highlights out new units that have been posted out, lesson plans. It has highlighted out key educators across the globe. That's the other cool part. Is to kind of learn about what individuals are doing around the world and how they're approaching teaching science and teaching social studies and religion and geography and so forth in the classroom. So there's definitely some twists. There's definitely some hands-on learning that's going on, and lots of resources that are absolutely available out there. The Geo Challenge is the one that is going to be geared towards kind of this classroom setting. And it's for solving these real life world problems that are going on. It's going to come back. So definitely be looking out for this one here, because the Nat Geo Challenge is actually for grades K through 12. And the big one that they were focusing on was the ocean plastics. That's the one that you had to come up with kind of this background information about what the world's oceans look like currently, why there's a problem, and then you had to come up with a physical solution for picking out plastic in the ocean itself. So kids sketched out models, they came up with actual diagrams and then physical models of what their solution would be, and then they actually had to go through and build them. And just definitely a really fun, cool way to be able to start connecting in and giving some hands-on learning. So be on the lookout for this one here. We are told that it should be coming back in the fall itself. The other one that I will briefly touch upon is the Educator Certification and the online courses. So the educator certification is a little bit of a process, but it is well worth it. It is such an amazing opportunity to connect with educators around the world, to learn about the human environmental interaction that goes on, to learn about the geography component, what these explorers are doing on a regular basis. National Geographic really puts a ton of money behind these resources and behind supporting educators. There's lots of grants that are available to you as well once you become a certified educator. It's free. You actually can get grad credits for doing it. They are going to be opening it up very shortly. So probably by the summertime should be the next round. They offer it out a couple times a year. But it does go through, it connects you again into kind of this global community. It's state standard aligned. They really take the time to build in these lesson plans, and then you get to go through and tweak them into how you would utilize in the classroom. You create a video that demonstrates how you've used these resources in your classroom, and then also what your plan is moving forward. So National Geographic really wants to make sure that you are continuing to be kind of this explorer in your classroom. So once you have that certification, how are you still fostering that learning? How are you still continuing to grow as an individual, but also in your classroom itself? The other thing that they have once you kind of have that certification component is they offer out online courses. These online courses, the most recent one that I had done is the global climate change. This one pushed me outside my comfort zone, and it was fantastic. I got to learn so much from the science teachers who were in this one here. It's broken down by unit, and you basically are going through and learning about how climate change is affecting different aspects of the world. Your task is to basically come up with some global solutions in terms of how you do it. This one here starts to open up on April 7th and it runs through May 25th. It is paced out for you. You get tons of feedback. You will work on a team with other educators to try and solve out these issues that you might be dealing with or trying to understand these problems. And so you work through chats and so forth, but some really great opportunities. Mapping as a visualization, this one's a really fun one. This one here, you get to take a look at a ton of different maps, and you get hands-on learning in terms of how to utilize these maps in the classroom. So as I mentioned to you, the desktop maps, the individual maps, drawing out maps, and then utilizing National Geographic's computer software that they have for basically utilizing maps as well. And then the geo inquiry process, this one here I have not taken, but this is an opportunity that you have. So there are tons of different courses that are available. And as I mentioned, they're free. So it's a great way to be able to go through and just hone in on some skills. And it's fun to be able to move outside that box of social studies and really to create kind of this hands-on learning and be able to do that interdisciplinary with students. Okay. Right. So thank you so much everyone for joining me, for taking time out of your afternoon. I know that everybody's schedules are so crazy right now, so I greatly appreciate it. Are there any questions that we still have, Joe?
That is all we had during the session. I will take a moment right now to see if anybody would like to drop any questions into the chat or into the Q&A. I'm keeping an eye on both. If you would prefer to just turn your video on and just ask Sarah directly, you can also let me know that. Just let me know in the chat and I can give you the option to pop into her video as well. So I'm just going to take a moment to let everybody process that information and see if there are any questions. See, this is the really tough thing with wait time and webinars. For all I know, someone's like typing a really, really intricate, well thought out question, and I'm not giving them enough time. But then there's also this awkwardness of just Sarah and I staring at each other like, what's going on?
And feel free to email me too if something comes up. that you have questions if you're searching or looking through the National Geographic website itself, or if you're looking for resources or lesson plans. I'm more than happy to share out my lesson plans for what I've used with National Geographic, or hopefully try to help you go in the right direction.
Well, Sarah, at this time, that's my calendar reminder. At this time, I will give you our formal thank you again for sharing your passion, your expertise, and this pretty exhaustive list of resources. So thank you very much.
Thank you.